What's going on YouTube? Welcome back to the Gray Area with your host, it's that kid Greg. Now today I wanted to talk about drugs, the war on drugs, and well, legalization, but we'll get to that in a few. Now drugs are all around us in this country, both recreational drugs and medicinal drugs. They are everywhere, but the biggest distinction that comes about is what we perceive to be drugs. For example, we all know the usual, oh, that's heroin and that's speed and that's whatever, but things like caffeine and alcohol aren't really looked at as drugs, even though they are. I mean, where is that line really drawn on what's considered a drug and what's considered medicine or normal? You know what I mean? Where is that line drawn? You could say, well, caffeine is not as bad as those other drugs because, you know, it helps you be productive throughout the day and it keeps you up and etc. But you can also, you know, gain a dependence on caffeine, and withdrawal symptoms do happen when you remove caffeine from your life. I've experienced this, I've had friends experience this. I cut coffee out of my life several months ago actually. It's been a while now. Because I noticed that it was actually causing me to crash at work. So I stopped drinking it entirely, and there was a week where I was just like trying to stay awake, but I did get it off, and now I don't need it in my system to wake up in the morning, you know, just a cold shower, breakfast, and I'm good to go. Go back a few decades and cigarettes were seen as the norm. You know, you go out, you have a cigarette, you're hanging out with your friends, it's all fun, it's social. It was like having a drink. It was so normalized, it was so simple. But now with the more knowledgeable public that we have, there's more research, more information that we have about what cigarettes can do to the body, and nicotine, which is like the primary chemical in cigarettes that make you feel different, like make you feel up or whatever, because people experience cigarettes differently, is seen as like this huge evil, when in actuality, nicotine by itself isn't that harmful to the body. I mean, it's still bad, but it's not like the end-all be-all of substances that you should keep away from your system. But we all know what we came here to discuss: weed.
Smoke weed every day.
People have been fighting for the legalization of marijuana in this country for a few decades now. And it's starting to become more of an open issue because, well, we have states in the United States that have legalized marijuana for recreational and medicinal use. Either all to one side, we can have all of it, or some just going with medicinal use. But people who still argue against marijuana seem to have doubled down, despite the fact that there are many facts that show that many of their claims are false. One thing I find interesting about this is that many of these arguments that are used to keep marijuana within prohibition are the same arguments that were used to keep alcohol in prohibition also many years ago. And we all saw how bad the prohibition of alcohol turned out for the country. It caused gangs, it caused crime in the streets, people still did it anyway. And it's the same thing for marijuana, which is why it boggles my mind that you have these old school cats in Congress and the Supreme Court who still say, oh no, we have to keep it illegal because blah 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 blah, even though it's the same things that have been going on since the original prohibition. In this sense, weed and alcohol aren't that different at all. In both cases, what you really have is the government telling you what substances you're allowed to put in your body and what substances you aren't allowed to put in your body. And if we want to talk personally, I think something as harmless as marijuana should be legal, because not only is it a person's choice to want to feel that, just like it's a person's choice to want to drink alcohol, but we've seen the medicinal benefits of marijuana. There's a great story about a 6-year-old child who used to have hundreds of seizures a week because of a rare form of epilepsy, and all the medication that they were putting this child on did nothing to help. And it finally reached a point where the parents, they tried medicinal marijuana that they had to obtain, and make illegally, they had to prepare this medicine for their child illegally, but it helped the child so much that they barely have any seizures, and the mother like keeps a log, and like the kid is down to like 1 or 2 seizures and can live a normal life, and I think that's amazing. I will try my best to find the story and link it down below so that you guys can check it out and show me what you think. But what about substances that are too dangerous to put in your body, like crack and meth? These things are objectively horrible for you. We can see that, and their effects cause harm to people around you. They put you in a state where you lose the ability to control how you act around other people, and that is dangerous and that's scary. While it's easy to say, yes, of course those things should be illegal, they're obviously terrible for people and everybody, you have to remember that amphetamines, which is part of the word methamphetamines, which is what meth comes from, are used in a lot of medications, and so are opiates, which, if you guys didn't know, opiates are used to create stuff like heroin. These are why these drugs are Schedule 2 instead of Schedule 1. Schedule 2 meaning that the substance is prohibited but are still allowed to be used in medicinal purposes, etc., etc. But there's also some issue with that as well, because we have seen that people become addicted to things like prescription painkillers, and the main ingredient in a lot of these prescription painkillers just so happens to be opiates, aka the same stuff that goes into heroin like we just mentioned. And a lot of the time, people who seek out stuff like heroin they have a dependence that was grown because of a prescription painkiller that they took that they became addicted to. And when they realize that they can't get it, they look for things like heroin because they have a similar kind of high. Even things like cough syrup, which are mixed with like soda and turned into drink or lean or whatever you want to call it, can get you high. And it's like, where do you draw this line? It's like, do you want to make all these substances super illegal because they can cause harm to the person? Or should they all be Schedule 2? Or like, it's a blurry line. It's a gray area. And so it's very hard to just say this has to be this and this has to be that and that's final. My personal opinion is that the laws on drugs in this country are way too draconian. I feel that marijuana, just like cigarettes and alcohol, should be completely legal and should be allowed to be consumed by whoever feels like they should. They should, and that they want to, provided that they are of age, of course. But I do think that other drugs are also treated a bit too draconian-like in this country. I feel like drugs should be decriminalized, and rather than piping these people in and out of the prison industrial complex and feeding the police and prison revenue streams, I feel like we can spend that money much better by putting these people into rehabilitation, helping them get clean, because when you honestly think about it, the addicts are the real victims in this situation. They get hyped up on some stupid drug and they're forced to continue taking this thing, even if they may not want to anymore because they've grown a physical dependence on it. Their brain literally says you can't live without this anymore, and I think it's fucked up that we throw people in jail for that. The people that we should really be going after are the peddlers, the sellers, the distributors, these people who sell this stuff and push it onto people because they're just trying to make a quick buck. I feel like it's dumb to target the addicts, the victims, and turn them into criminals when we barely have any significant drug busts throughout the country on a regular basis. You know, you constantly hear this thing about the war on drugs, the stupid Nixon policy. And how far has it really gotten us? You know, there's not a significant, people still take drugs, people still do this stuff. It's still a problem. Hell, there's like a huge heroin problem in like rural and suburban areas right now. And it's ridiculous. And I think that instead of criminalizing people for putting something into their bodies because they're chasing after a high is wrong. And I feel like instead we should be trying to help these people, and we should be trying to stop the problem at the source, you know. But that's easier said than done. And I understand that in these videos I oversimplify a lot, and I try to make everything very easy and like partition it into a form where I can just talk about it off the top of my head, or with a small script like the one I'm reading from. Not really reading from, but guiding off of. But the problem remains, and I feel like having a heavy-handed approach to drug policies in this country is not a good idea, and we need to start looking at things with some sort of nuance. We need to start looking at it with some sort of finesse, and that way we can move our country to a better state and actually start helping people, helping our citizens, helping our fellow man in our country at least. And hopefully we can set examples for the rest of the world if they're not already ahead of us in this. But what do you guys think? Let me know in the comment section below, and as always, I want to thank you for watching. And remember, nothing is black and white.